Hello, it's Vicki LaRoe with Modern Jewelry Makers. Thank you for clicking on this video. It is so good to see you. It has been a while since I have done kind of this style of video for my channel. So let's jump into it. A couple weeks ago, I shared the launch of our new palette for the summer, our Southwest Sunset bead palette, our precious palette that uses beautiful gemstones and freshwater pearls, all in this kind of gorgeous traditional Southwest colors. This palette, along with the little crystal collection in the same color story that goes with her. You could order them separate or together, but I like the little accent crystals. I think it gives more mileage to the palette and gives more dimensions and sizes. But again, you can normally use it. You can do the palette, or you can do the crystals, or you can do both. But along with those palettes, I also shared some different designs and jewelry kits that were available as an entire collection. So that's been really fun. And definitely, let's see, one of them was our little dancing gems bracelet here, which is so beautiful. Which is all the different gemstones. This little wrap bracelet, this is our Pro Finish bracelet that you can make with the crystal collection. It's just, they're all crystals, but in that color story. You could do it as a long necklace, but I like to wear it as a wrap bracelet, along with several others. One of the most popular ones, though, for sure, was this lovely Gemstone Chain Float that I have on here. I'm going to do videos vertical again so you can see them all, but it's this long, lovely chain float. And for many of our kits, I'll also include the full class video tutorial with it, especially if it's just a more intense piece or lots of techniques or that kind of thing. I like to be able to also provide the class with it as well, and that way you can see many different variations or troubleshoot things that may happen, blah blah blah. But these designs, I didn't really feel needed an entire video to do them. I make a pretty thorough handout with step-by-step photos for all of them. However, when I was making the handout for this float, there were a couple things, a couple techniques, a couple times I thought, oh, I wish I could show this in video instead, just to really be able to show it better. So I thought I would make this video, and so it's not an entire tutorial. I'm just going to share a couple tips and techniques for this float, and then that way this works well for a YouTube video, because I don't often share the entire tutorial for a project here, because it's meant to be a special purchase that comes with your with your kit when you purchase them. But today I'm just going to show definitely some great tips and the different techniques you need to use whenever you want to work with bead chain and make, whether you're doing this type of kit or even just other variations of it. So let me show you some different style variations, and then we're going to tip the camera down and get right on it. So this Gemstone Chain Float is 4 feet of beading chain. And if you're not familiar with beading chain, it's very thin chain. Here's the silver. That is anywhere between 0.7 or 8 to 1 millimeter thick, and can be available in a lot of different metals. There are a lot of beads that will fit on this, and there are a lot of beads that won't. Traditionally, normally gemstones or freshwater pearls are not going to fit because they are drilled, the holes are drilled so small. So you would need to use normally any man-made glass beads, crystals, lab-created stones, that kind of thing. But there are many beads that would fit. In our float, though, I wanted to use the gemstones and pearls and crystals, and so I was able to select some that do fit in our color story. And this, our kit, this is 4 feet a beading chain, which is a lot. It's quite long. And 30-ish beads on here that you'll use depending on how you want to wear the piece. And so you could wear it long like I had it before. You can also, of course, double it. And, you know, I use like a kind of what I call a statement toggle, or a pretty kind of fancier toggle in front. And so that way you can kind of, line it up however you want to, but then you've got a pretty, double strand there. That is really fun. So you can wear it, doubled like that. Or one way I like to wear it doubled is more like, I don't want to pull on it too hard, but I call it like a long short. So I pull it where there we go, where there's a little shorter, almost chokery, and then it'd be tall, and then the clasp comes down here, which I think that's really cute. And right across from the clasp on the design, I make a little larger bead, more of a focal kind of bead, and some spacers when I want to do this kind of design. So I think that's really another cute way to wear it. Let me unwrap her. You could also definitely do that wrap bracelet like I have the other one done, right? Depending on how long you want to make this, you can wrap and wrap and wrap and have a really gorgeous, look. Again, because all the colors work together, and so there's many ways to wear her and style her. And another, you don't have to keep it as one long piece. You can cut this. At 48 inches, you can cut and have like one long 30-inch and then a wrap bracelet or something as well, or however you want to cut it. I show in the handout another variation, which is this, what I would call a permanent double strand, where I cut not quite in half. I cut one a little bit shorter than the other so that the shorter strand would kind of nestle in the longer one. And when I did the placement and design of the beads, that's the same idea. I was very conscious of where I was placing the beads, but this is with two strands cut and then both into the clasp. That you can make it however you want to, but it's really cute little double strand like that. So many options for you. That's right, and that's one in silver. Very cute. Okay, so what I want to share is the technique that I use with the beading chain for this float to secure the beads, and then I'm going to share the finishing on it as well. So it would obviously depend on what design you think you want to wear or how you want to wear it the most, but I'm just going to kind of go with, we want to string it as one long piece, let's say, but I'm just going to use kind of a shorter piece of beading chain here for our sample. So I'm going to tip us down so we can go for a little ride and play with some techniques here. It's kind of getting dark. Let me make sure we get some light on here. Okay, so I know this is a short piece. I just grabbed a scrap piece of chain, but we're going to pretend this is our whole piece. And I generally fold it in half. So here's our center. And then I recommend in the instructions even to lay out your beads or an idea of a pattern first. Because all these beads are different. There's not an exact pattern per se, right? So I generally will start with whatever one I would want to be in the front of the center, and then I'm just gonna kind of build on the sides there, trying to alternate shapes, sizes, colors, you know, everything as we go along, and, you know, however you want to do it. I don't have any turquoise in the sample. Let's put the turquoise there, maybe. Okay. And even in the instructions, I recommend doing, you know, just 6 or 8 inches at a time as we move along the entire thing. Because once we get the beads on, they're on. I mean, you can pull them off, you've got to move them all off, right? So this is where I suggest we kind of play a little bit with the pattern and kind of like and find a placement that we like. So I'm stringing that one on the middle, that little adventurine, and then this red coral, this freshwater pearl, believe me, it's no small feat to find gemstones and pearls that fit on this chain. There's our fire opal and a green adventurine. This is gorgeous citrine. And I could put crystals in here too, and you could definitely add crystals to break these up. Okay, so let's say this is our first little section. And I like these spaced out anywhere between 1 inch and 1.5 inches, or even somewhere right in the middle of that. What is that, 1.25 inches? Then something like that. My little piece of chain is so small though that something like that. I'll try to get them even. Okay, now before I jump into securing them, I want to show you. So typically, let me grab this real quick to show you just another little thing. So typically, with beading chain, here, I can do it. The gold shows up better. I'll just scoot the beads down. Right, when beading chain first came on the scene, what we did for floats is put crimp tubes to secure the bead, right? Just little tiny 2x2 crimp tubes, right? I know it's hard to see for you, but right, tiny little crimp tubes. And if you've been a student or a customer of mine, you know that we only use sterling silver or 14 karat gold fill crimp tubes, right? Any other kind of metal is too hard. You need a precious metal so it's malleable and crimps beautifully. If you use stainless steel or aluminum or any kind of cheap crap, you're going to get a bad crimp, and you'll think it's you, but it's not you. It's the crimp. So there's a crimp tube, and here's a little mother of pearl bead, and then we would typically use another crimp tube right after the bead. And let me get that on there. And then depending on where you wanted it placed, that crimp tube, you'd crimp on both sides of the bead, and that would hold that bead in place, right? Then it's crimped there. And so for a float, you'd have to make sure you're spaced out everything perfectly even, right? Especially like this, when there's no movement of the bead. If it was off even by a, centimeter, you'd be able to see. So you want to place it, but it also uses a lot of crimp tubes. And like I was saying, sterling or gold fill crimp tubes are pretty pricey these days. I don't know how much they are exactly. Sterling's like 25 cents a piece. Gold filled are definitely like 50 cents each. And if I'm going to use 2 on each bead, and I've got 30 beads, it's 60 of them. It's $30 more just in the crimp tubes. Not saying it's not worth it. It's just an FYI. Now, typically, instead of gold filled crimp tubes, if I'm working with gold, I will do sterling, and then I will cover with a gold crimp cover, like I did here, right? But to do that here, it's going to end up costing the same by the time you do the crimp tube and the cover. So you're just adding more steps. And there's no moving that once you have it. Like if it's off, you just gotta figure it out. What I'm gonna show you here is a different way to do this, cheaper or less expensive, and also with options to be able to adjust it or fix it later. Okay, so let's go back to spacing this out. So what I use instead for this particular float is a calotte, which is an old-fashioned type of bead tip, or what we used before bead tips were around. And it's basically a cup with a little loop on the end. So I'm going to cover the loop in my pliers, but right, it's a little cup looking thing like this. And it typically would go on the end of your necklace or bracelet for a knot. So for any kind of thread, silk or any kind of cotton, anything that made a knot in the end, this little cup went over that knot, and then the loop on the end went to your clasp. Right? Easy peasy. These days, for thread or silk, we don't use these. Typically, we use a bead tip, which is similar. It's a cup like this, but the hole is here where my wrist would be. There's a hole in the center, and so you string through it and close around it, and then it has a hook on the outside, and so that is typically more secure and looks a little better. But these calottes can definitely come in handy should something break. It's a nice way to just attach onto something if you need to, if you need a loop on something. But for this float, what we do is I'm going to cut the little loops off. You'll need a heavy duty cutter. So whatever you have in the garage or something, if you don't, you'll need or a memory wire cutter, but really do not use your good wire cutter, right? Because we're cutting through stainless steel. And for what it's worth, these are a higher quality calotte. These are made in Hong Kong, stainless steel plated with sterling or gold. I'm almost out of my gold ones. I've been looking to replace them, and all I can find are kind of the cheap, my suppliers out of them. And so all I can find are the cheap, yucky ones on Michael's or whatever, and those will feel like tin, and I guarantee they will feel so thin. Anyway, I'm cutting this right off. There's no need to file them or anything like that. Just get at the bottom of the loop, cut her off. And typically, on this kit, you need 30-ish, 32. So I try to cut them all ahead of time, just so they're done. But anyway, then you've got your little cups. Okay. And for placement, you're going to use your crimping pliers, right? They'll look like this. We're going to use a top station, and we're going to put the calotte in the top station, cup facing up and open, right? So I'm going to hold it up. You can see the calotte up and open. And I'm just keeping the tension just right so I don't squeeze it closed. And for placement, right, I'm trying to place my beads a little over 1 inch apart. And then I'm going to put the calotte just right between them, right over that area is between. And I'm going to squeeze it on, and I'm gently squeezing that on, not all the way, almost all the way. I want to be able, if I want to be able to move it or adjust it, I want to be able to do that. And so I'm normally pretty kind of gentle putting that on, and I don't quite have it there all the way. But I want to check. Oh, I didn't check to make sure the ends were even. So if I even the ends up, you can see where these are not even at all. That's okay. But I'm just going to squeeze those on, and that's it. These are actually pretty secure. I'm going to show you later how to move them, how to take them off and move them. But for now, we'll just leave it. So then you're just going to keep going, placing that in the crimping plier, separating my beads to make sure they're just that little over 1 inch apart, and then I'm placing this in the middle of them. And so I work up one side and then the other, and I'm trying for the most part to make sure they're even-ish. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, it may make a difference depending on what design you're doing. Like if you're wearing that double strand where you want them both to definitely lay even. But if you're doing like the one long strand, it's not that important that they're like perfectly even, especially if you're going to be wrapping it, a lot, that kind of thing, right? So I'll go ahead and do the last two that I have on here. Space the beads apart. Little culottes. Well, no, because then I'm just wasting culottes. Okay, but we hold it up, and that my middle bead is my center. I'd center that, and then I kind of see how everything. That's not too bad. That's okay. That's fairly even, right? But if it wasn't, I'm going to show you how we can adjust it, later. What I want to show you right now is the ends, though. So for the whole necklace, right, I would just keep doing that little section at a time, working all the way till I have my 4 feet done, right? And then when I get to the end, this chain doesn't have any kind of open link, so it needs to use a cordon crimp, the same kind of little crimp we use on leather or other tightly woven chains. I did an entire video on this that I could link below, but here I'm going to put the plier over the loop again, just FYI, right? And it looks just like that. This is a 1 millimeter, and they make different sizes. In my video, I show this size and the 2 millimeter, so it depends on how thick the material is you're using, but it's basically to attach to the end, so we have a loop, right? Because there's no loop on this chain. So you want to again use the top of the crimping plier, place the 1 millimeter cordon crimp in the top of the crimping plier, so it's even, loops facing out, it's facing up and open. I promise you there's no universe where you are laying that crimp down and laying the chain in and picking it up and making that work. It doesn't work. I know your brain wants it to work this way. It does not. You need to place this in the plier first. Make sure it's up, facing up. The crimp is in the center. Then for a chain, for leather cord, if it's stiff, this is even kind of stiff, but sometimes with other kind of link chains, they're floppy, so I'll have to tip it down and drop the chain in until it kind of pokes out the bottom a little bit. Then this chain, it's so thin. See, it wants to come off. So I'm doing this so far away from me. Let me see if I can get this to scoop back in there for me, so that we're not wasting it. I can, yay. Sometimes you're lucky to do that. But once it has that crimp, you're crimping it this way, then you're going to turn it and crimp on the seam, right, until I've got that crimp on the end. I'm going to do it again on the other side. I'm absolutely not going to edit that part out because it happens, right? That is why I put extra findings in all of our kits. This chain is very thin. With leather cord or like a thicker chain, you won't have, it'll be much easier. But you're going to crimp up and down the whole thing. I'm going to turn it, crimp up and down on the seam. And again, I have an entire video that shows you how to do this. So you've got on the end there, and then you could, I guess, use just a jump ring to attach your clasp, but in our kit, because the clasp is what I call kind of a statement clasp, and I think it's kind of meant to be worn in the front if you want to, I have, for this kit, select a couple little beads to go off of the clasp. And these are smaller ones, but you could choose a larger one if you wanted to. We just use a little eye pin loop. And I typically use, here's a little 2 or 3 millimeter round. How are you going to see that? A little daisy spacer. I think that makes a nice accent. And we'll use that gorgeous citrine. I know this looks like glass. It's not. That is, yummy, high quality citrine. So beautiful. another little daisy spacer on top, and then a little loop. Look how pretty that is. Just makes such a pretty little accent. And then we make a loop on the other side, right? And where's my chain nails? Here it is. I can just, let me undo this. Right, and that way you just attach it to the, between the cord and crimp loop and the clasp. And again, you know, you might want to use a larger bead. You know, it's pretty. I just grabbed kind of some smaller ones, but this is how you're making these little component or accent components, right? That just go right between your end link and the clasp. And for that double strand, right, then both ends hook into the bottom loop. I'll show you in just a sec. So it's very, very simple, right? So on the silver one, right, there's just the two strands because I cut two separate strands. So there's the two ends that go right into the little finishing beads, right? Very cute. Very easy. Simple, simple. And it's just a nice way to kind of jazz up the beads around the clasp. Okay, so I want to show you how to take the culottes off. So if you really get them, you really don't like the placement of one, and you really want to move it, or it's like barely hanging on sometimes, you get it on their cattywampus, they can be removed. So unlike a crimp tube, to do that method, these can be removed and sometimes even reused. It depends how successful we are getting it off. But you're going to use your heavy duty cutter again. You're not going to cut it, but you are going to go on the top and bottom of where the seam is. Right here's the seam on the culotte. I'm going to go on the top and bottom of it with my cutter. You might be able to use a different plier. I don't know why I use cutter. And I'm squeezing gently, and it's opening the cup up. And once it's open a little bit, I'm gonna pop it off. And I'm able to reuse that. It might not be in exactly the same shape, but I am at least able to reuse it. And sometimes you're not. If you really destroyed it getting it off, well, that's okay. You know, that happens. But like I said, they can be moved around. You know, another thing that's cool about using them as part of this design, when I was doing that double wrap or wrapping it around twice, it's just the nature of how these fall that keeps a double strand in place. You know, sometimes if you've worn a double strand and then it wants to move on you all day, that does not happen with this. It just kind of helps it all stay in place, and you know, and the beads move around. I think it's really fun. Okay, I think that's everything we have to show here. So I'm going to scooch it back up. Almost a half an hour. And whoops, and scoot the light out of the way. And there it is. So those are really some of the main techniques I wanted to share about the float. And again, you don't have to use gemstones on it. It's very tricky to find gemstones and pearls that work. You could do crystals on the whole thing. It'd be gorgeous. Doesn't matter. Our kits and our palettes are always limited edition things, so depending on when you're watching this, there may or may not, be any left. At this very moment, I literally have one or two left of almost everything, including the float. But again, because everything is, we do limited edition, kind of runs here for our launches, I will leave a link below to the beading chain. I always have that, and the culottes. Again, they're very good quality. If you do happen to find some at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, or just be very gentle with them, because they're going to be so thin and yucky. Just thin, that you may be able to you'll squish them perhaps. So, better to have a really good quality, not China, right? Make sure they're just made Korea, Hong Kong, Japan. Those are the best findings besides USA. But for mass-produced findings, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan. I could do a whole video on quality. I'll leave a link, Bead Chain, culottes, and then just maybe a general link to our current kits and current palettes because they change all the time, as well as maybe for our Online Beaclub, because our members always get notified first for every new launch and kit, design, and palette and sale. So you may think about wanting to join our Online Beaclub. It's $10 for the first year to join, and then it comes with a $10 off coupon, so that means it's free, basically. And then it's only $5 each year after that if you want to join, and you get 10% off all your purchases and tons of other stuff. It's very fun. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was fun to do this kind of video again. I love this float. And I will see you in the next one. And until then, sparkle brightly like the star that you are. Peace.